So we're going to have the conversation that no one in real life actually wants to ask, but everyone really wants to know. How much money are we spending? Hey, I'm Stephanie. If you're new here, I have been making daily vlogs about my experience traveling and working for an entire year. And we are on day 63. I wanted to talk to you about the finances of our trip, specifically how much money we are spending on the trip. If you haven't been watching, and no one has, I'll tell you where we've been so far. So we started our trip in Taiwan, mostly in Taipei. After 2 weeks, we went to Thailand. We were in Krabi for about 5 weeks, and now we're in Koh Samui. At the end of our time in Koh Samui should be about 3 weeks. One thing we did, which actually I haven't really been doing, it's been really, really nice that Bran has taken this on. He has taken on tracking all of our finances on this trip. So every time we spend money on anything, he writes it down in a spreadsheet, just like what it is, how much it was. And usually the spreadsheet also helps convert it from, whatever the local currency is to dollars, American dollars. We can kind of do it on the go, but being able to track our expenses that way and then have a rough idea of what we're spending per day has been really, really helpful. Our finances really break down into like two buckets. The first bucket that we have is really like our daily spending. What do Brandon and I spend on like food, any activities we do, any random thing we decide to buy, any amount of money that we spend per day like goes in that daily spending category. And then the other category would be like the stuff we kind of spent outside of that, like buying our flights, buying travel health insurance, paying for accommodations, hotels, Airbnbs. Those are the main three things that we have been paying for that are not going under our daily spending to cover like this entire trip. Now, we do have some other bills, including like things we're managing at home back in the US, but I'm not going to include that in this conversation because like this is really about like what is the trip cost, not just what is our life cost. To go back to our two buckets, this finance conversation actually ends up being like quite simple. Our accommodations have pretty much ended up being anywhere from between $900 to about $1,500 total per month. So as far as flights have gone so far, everything we booked is probably around $2,500 total for the both of us. Now, a lot of our flights, we've tried very hard to get kind of the cheapest, best, most practical flight. And we've also been booking one-way flights. We're not booking a there and back. We're just booking one way. A lot of the flights and travel that we've done has been in Asia. So some of those flights are quite cheap. They're like maybe $100, if that. That has kept like the overall total price for our flights down. If we're adding on like, I'm gonna go on the high end of our accommodations, so 1,500. And then as far as flights, if I break that down between the 2 months that we've been on, that's $1,250. What was the last thing? Oh, the travel insurance. Okay, can't forget that. And then the way our health insurance was, which for 4 months was $500. Insane. Insane. That would cover like nothing in the US. Since our travel insurance was about $500 for 4 months, I'm going to add on $125 to that. In total for that first bucket, we have $3,125. So we've got, our flights, where we're staying, and like travel insurance, all that stuff for like paying for the trip in that first bucket. So our total spending for that first bucket ends up being a little over $3,000 for the both of us. So again, a little bit more than $1,500 if you're going to go per person. For the second bucket, our daily spending, food, any activities we do, paying for our moped, like anything we spend during the day. Like if we're buying an eSIM, literally everything goes under that second bucket. And that has been a range as well, of course. We've been anywhere from like $75 to $80 a day down to like $20, maybe even a little bit less than that, depending on what we're doing. And this has actually been pretty consistent between Taipei, Taiwan, and other parts of Thailand. So being in Bangkok, being in Krabi, being in Koh Samui, where we are right now, like honestly, we've kind of stuck to that range. The average has been very consistent. We have been hovering in the $45 to like $55 range almost every single day. On average, we're spending about $50 a day for both of us, not just for one person, for both of us. I've been pretty surprised by that actually. I figured we might see a bigger difference per location or per country, but no, we're kind of sitting right around $50. Sometimes it's been insane how cheap our food is. It's really crazy. And we're not like holding back. Like obviously we prefer going to cheap places that are good, but it's not like we haven't spent a little bit more here and there. But, a month being roughly 30 days, this second bucket ends up being again about 1,500 for the month for both of us. So in a grand total per month, and this is very loose, like these numbers are not good and perfect, and hate them if you want, but I'm just trying to give you like a ballpark of what this might look like for two people. So basically this ballpark number to cover two people in all of our travel expenses ends up being like $46.25. That's crazy. The fact that per person it's only a little bit over $2,000 a month to do what we're doing. Maybe if I hadn't spent the past 10 years in San Francisco, like perhaps I would think that that was more expensive. But because before this trip we were living in San Francisco, one of the most expensive cities in the US, this is mind blowing how cheap it is to do this. Now, I'm not saying that $2,000 a month per person or, $4,625 like for a couple isn't a lot of money. I know that throwing around these numbers might feel a little annoying and privileged, and I understand that. Like it's not like everyone just has piles of money sitting around for this. But the reason I wanted to talk about it is like this ended up being a lot cheaper than we thought it would be. This is so much cheaper than our life in San Francisco costs by like a ton. And yeah, you might make the case that like, coming from SF where it's super expensive and rent is crazy, of course this seems like such a bargain and it's so cheap, whatever. But I will say, like, if we were living in another part of the US, we might like own a house or have more stuff that we've been paying for. So our bills probably wouldn't be like that much lower than they are in San Francisco. So take that with a grain of salt. I think the main takeaway is that for this trip, for the two of us, we're spending a little over $150 a day to do this. It's not that bad. It's actually not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Like these finances are actually a lot more achievable than people realize. For some people, spending $2,000 on a 2-week vacation is pretty normal, right? How can $2,000 for a normal vacation also be kind of the same as, one person's worth of a vacation for a month? Like, how does that work out? And the reason is really like the flexibility that we've had. Because we can fly anytime we want, we can kind of build our schedule around when certain locations are cheaper, when it's like their off season. We can fly on a day where the flight is cheaper because, a couple days difference doesn't make a huge difference for us. And we can also do things like, we took a bus and a ferry to Koh Samui instead of flying, and that saved us a lot of money. But if we were on more of a time crunch, perhaps we would have had to fly, right? We can get the numbers down a little bit because of that. And then on top of it, when you're renting a scooter or also, getting an Airbnb for an entire month, the cost per day goes down a lot sometimes. And the fact that we've been, staying in certain places for longer, we're not necessarily doing expensive, island hopping excursions every single day. I'm working, some days we're not doing too much more than going to the beach or going to the gym. It's more relaxed. We have a lot of like normal life things we're doing too, and those things are all pretty inexpensive or free. So that is kind of how our finances are probably lower than you might think, considering I know how easy it is to spend a couple $1,000s on a 2-week trip or even a 1-week trip, depending on where you're going and how much things are costing. We've been trying to stick to countries that are a little bit more affordable as far as like exchange rate goes. So, being in Asia, being in certain parts of Asia, that's really helping us. That's a big part of why this has been less expensive. So the reason I wanted to talk about this is like, I really think that traveling for an extended period of time, whether that's 1 month, or 6 or a year or even longer, it might not cost as much as you think. And of course, like, you don't want to be reckless and just blow all your savings that way. You do want to have some things around for emergencies, but the cost of doing this might not be as bad as you think. And a dream of going somewhere for more than a couple of weeks or quitting your job in order to do that, it might be more achievable than you think. I even know people who have negotiated like sabbaticals or things like that with their companies because they were like, I want to travel so badly that I'm willing to walk away. And the company was like, no, you can't leave us. Like, fine, we'll let you go on a 6-week trip. Like, that happens sometimes. I just want you to know that, like, if you're someone who's thought about extended travel, you have a dream trip in mind, going for an extended amount of time might not cost as much as you think, especially if you're strategic about how you plan your trip. It might be a lot less than what you're spending in the place that you live. Now, I was just talking literally yesterday about trade offs that we made, both financially and otherwise, in order to do this and like make this financially possible for us. But I just want you to know, like, doing something like this, going to Thailand for 2 months, it could cost you like $4,000. That's not a crazy amount of money to save. It's not 10,000, it's not, 50,000, it's like $5,000. Like, a lot of people could actually do that, you know? It's not crazy. Now, I'm saying all of this, and I know everyone's like getting laid off right and left, and I know everyone's stressed about money. Yes, I know all these things, but I just don't want you to think that this is a dream that you can't go for. And if you like put a little bit of money away and you keep focusing on that, the idea that you could get to an amount that could handle a 2-month trip is very achievable. And I really think like it just takes time and some diligence to do it. I hate the fact that so many people think that it's not possible. And they think that because the money is like an abstract number that they haven't thought about or calculated at all. And we even had a hard time with that when we were planning this trip. I really had to guesstimate to think about like what were we going to spend per month. So it's been very interesting to actually see what the reality of that is. I hope this is interesting. I hope this is helpful. And I really hope that you start saving for your own trip because you can do it. Anyway, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for talking about money, everyone's both favorite and least favorite topic of all time. And I will check in with you tomorrow. Goodbye.